I guarantee it. Oh, this one? Is this good? 1, 2, 3. Hi, my name is James Davenport. Who am I? Why am I here?
You have alter ego?
Perhaps. We're going to have no technical difficulties today.
Before we get started, was there a question 791 added?
791?
Right, I know we had 790 and then it went to 792.
No, 791, I believe, did not make it on the ballot.
Okay.
That's why there's a skip there.
Okay, but 792 doesn't go into effect till October of 2018?
I'll have to look and see. I don't remember. If it says that in the language, that would be correct.
I just read a couple of different things trying to get right.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Hi, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay? Do I need to turn on the microphone? We're okay? All right. I would like to believe you all came out here to hear me talk because I'm such a wonderful speaker. I'm inclined to believe you're here because you got a free lunch, but that's okay. All right, you're here. I've got a captive audience. I'll take it. All right, so we're going to be talking specifically about the state questions that are going to be on the ballot in November here in the state of Oklahoma. And a lot of people don't know about these questions. You might have heard about one or two of them, but for the most part, some people who walk into the voting booth on November 8th, when they see that on the ballot, it'll be the first time they've been introduced to that idea. So in order to help you better prepare and to get a head start on thinking about these questions, we're going to run through these 7 state questions. I've been told to make sure that you all understand we are live streaming this, and so if you get if I move around and you're close to me, you might get picked up on the live stream, and your voice could go out to wherever. So they said, be careful what you say. All right, always good advice. With that stated, before we get into the questions, I wanted to just run down some general voter information for you guys to make sure that you're clear. Now, wow, that is way over here. All right, so the last day to register to vote in Oklahoma is this Friday, October 14th. If you register between now and Friday, you probably need to register at your county election board to make sure it's processed and you actually get to vote on November 8th, all right? If you're going to vote absentee here in Oklahoma, the last date to request an absentee ballot is November 2nd. In Oklahoma, we have early voting basically the weekend before the election, so you can vote early on November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. All right, so now my understanding is that they have passed some legislation that allows for you to be able to vote early at places other than your county election board. But if you want to vote early, I advise you to call your county election board and find out if you need to vote there or if they have some satellite locations in your county to do that. And then Election Day, of course, as I mentioned, is November 8th. So those are some important dates that you need to keep in mind. How many of you are registered to vote already? All right, very good. So the dates you need to remember are those either early voting or election day dates, unless you're going to have to vote absentee. All right, in Oklahoma, you can register to be affiliated with one of 3 parties, or you can register as not affiliated with any party, all right, what we refer to as independent. All right, so in Oklahoma, if you want to affiliate with a party, your 3 choices are Republicans, Democrats, and Libertarians. If you don't want to affiliate with any of those, then you would register not affiliating with a party. And this is a good time just to take a minute and say, when you vote and you get to your ballot, you will see some candidates who are listed, and underneath them is the label independent, all right? There is no independent party per se, okay? Independent in Oklahoma means that candidate is not affiliated with one of those 3 recognized parties. All right? That's all it means. All right. We did a survey of students here at Rose to find out how many were registered. I'm pleased to report that 74% of those, now this was 998 respondents. Is that correct? Who's here? Is that correct? 998 respondents to this survey. 74% said that they were registered to vote, and 94% of those that are registered said that they planned on voting. Okay, so that's really, really good. Of those who were not registered to vote, 53%, so a majority, said they didn't plan on voting. All right, so not surprised. If you're not registered this late in the game, the odds are that you might not vote. Okay, now let's have a little bit of a dose of reality here for a second. Okay, you've probably heard something like this before, but I'm going to kind of beat you over the head with it again. Young voters, those voting ages 18 to 24, had the lowest percentage of voter turnout of any age group in the country. All right? There were 42% of those in that age group that are registered to vote. Okay? Of those in 2014, turnout amongst that age group was 17%. Okay? 17% of those 18 to 24 actually cast a vote. Okay? Compare that to my generation, Generation X, where we had almost 50% turnout. Okay? You want to go up one more to the baby boom generation, their turnout was over 60%. All right? Now, let me hit you with this statistic. The largest demographic of people who can vote, okay, is, of course, the baby boom generation, right? There are 69.7% or 7 million people, 69.7 million people are in that baby boom generation in the country, all right? The second largest demographic is yours, 18 to 35 voters. There are 69.2 million of you out there who could vote, all right? If you voted in the same proportion as the baby boom generation did, you would make a huge difference in the outcome of many elections, all right? So keep that in mind. Is it important you vote? It is absolutely important that you vote, all right? And if you want policies that reflect your values and your principles and what you think should happen, then you absolutely need to vote, because if you don't vote, you don't get paid any attention to by policymakers. Okay, this is especially important for students in my classroom, right? You know you get bonus points or extra credit if you actually vote. Some of you have asked, well, how do you know if we voted, right? And what did I say? I said, well, take a selfie while you're at the polling place, right? A couple of things that are important to note, okay? It is illegal under Oklahoma law, okay, to share a marked ballot with anybody else while you're voting, okay? It is also illegal for reporters and photographers to take a picture of anybody marking their ballot, all right? So my advice, take your selfie prior to filling out your ballot or after you have submitted your ballot, okay? Just to stay out of trouble with the election officials that will be there monitoring that. All right, this is an example of what the ballot will look like if you haven't voted in Oklahoma before, all right? We actually have one of the most recognized election systems in the country, all right? In Oklahoma, you hardly ever hear of either voter fraud or any kind of malfunctions with our systems. And in fact, in some states that have had trouble with their voting systems, i.e. Florida in 2000, election officials from Oklahoma went down and made a presentation telling them about how our system works, all right? In Oklahoma, you can vote straight party ticket if you so choose to do so, right? Up at the very top left-hand corner up here is that area where you can just select Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, and that's all you got to fill out, right? At least as far as candidates for state legislature, Congress, president goes, all right? So if you're a partisan and you want to save time in the election booth, there's one way of doing it. Otherwise, you will see. Now, I want to point out, all right, we all know about the presidential election, yes? Okay. So when you go and vote for president, okay, it'll have the name of the candidates, right, and their party, and then you see this list of other names down here. Yes? Can anybody tell me who these people are? Who? What's that? No, who said electors? Right, okay, so these are the designated electors for each party, right? So if that candidate, that presidential candidate, wins the popular vote in Oklahoma, those people will be the ones casting a vote in the Electoral College come December, okay? The ballot is pretty easy to follow, okay? You just go down the rows. One thing you'll notice, this is a sample of my ballot. If you want to get a sample of what your specific ballot will look like, you can go to the Oklahoma Election Board's webpage, and they've got a system where you type in your name and your zip code or something like that, and it'll pull up what your exact ballot will look like. All right. So if you want to know who are the candidates that are going to show up on my ballot, you can look there if you haven't heard from them by now. Okay. There are also a slate of judicial votes that can be cast, right? So from here down are judges. Judges have retention ballots in Oklahoma, and that's all they're going to ask. Should this judge be retained for this particular position? Okay. This is the first page. The second page contains what we're here to discuss, which are the state questions. All right. There are 7 state questions on the ballot, each of them dealing with a particular issue, although 2 are somewhat related. All right. And from here on out, we'll be covering those questions. Okay. All right. State question 776 is regarding the death penalty. All right. What this question will do is it will place within the Constitution of Oklahoma. All right. So this is, in effect, a constitutional amendment to Oklahoma's state constitution that will empower the legislature to use any method not declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Constitution, empower them to use that method as a method of execution. All right. It prevents the state from having the death penalty declared a cruel and unusual punishment within the state of Oklahoma. And it allows the legislature, if one method of executing an individual is declared unconstitutional according to the federal Constitution, it allows the legislature to move to a different method that has not been declared unconstitutional. Okay. Proponents of this measure have argued that the death penalty has broad public support in the state of Oklahoma and therefore should receive specific protection under the Oklahoma Constitution. They've also argued that lethal injection in Oklahoma may be declared unconstitutional because some of the problems that we've seen occur over the last couple of years. And this would allow policymakers to use other means of execution. Okay. Opponents of this have argued that, yes, traditionally Oklahomans have had broad support for the death penalty, but increasing opposition has been growing over the last several years to the death penalty, specifically as a result of some of these problems that we've seen occur in the administration of the death penalty. They've also said that this measure would make it harder to rule Oklahoma's death penalty unconstitutional, and it would undermine the state's currently existing moratorium on implementing the death penalty, as a result of some of the problems that we've seen with our lethal injection methods. And that is State Question 776. 777 deals with agriculture. All right, so this measure would create another amendment to the state constitution. Okay, and this amendment specifically would grant individuals the right to make use of agricultural technology, the right to make use of livestock procedures, and the right to make use of ranching practices. And it would limit lawmakers' ability to restrict or interfere with these rights unless the state had a compelling interest. That's the highest standard, by the way. So the state would have to show that it had some serious reason for needing to interfere with these farming practices. All right. Again, those supporting this measure argue that this protects farmers and ranchers from special interests who want to regulate the agriculture industry. They say that it also will protect agricultural jobs and small farmers, and that it will allow family farmers to, because they won't be burdened by some of these regulations, to have an easier time passing on those family farms to the next generation. Opponents say that this measure would protect basically corporate agricultural interests from the democratic process by placing regulatory questions in the hands of the courts rather than allowing the legislature to make those decisions. They would allow large corporate farms to pollute without having any kind of additional regulations placed on them, and it would eliminate certain protections for certain types of animal species that are common in farming and ranching. State Question 779 deals with education funding. This may be one that many of you have heard at least something about, right? So this measure is also a measure that would amend the state constitution. So the first three that we've looked at here all will amend the state constitution, okay? This proposal will create a 1 cent additional state sales tax for the purpose of funding education in Oklahoma. Now, the funds for this, how in the measure, breaks down how the funds will be distributed. So nearly 70%, 69.5% of the funds collected from this will go to common education, so K through 12 education. All right. Within that, there's a guaranteed $5,000 teacher pay raise for teachers in Oklahoma. There is also money set aside for creating additional programs such as things to promote graduation rates, college and career readiness, and reading programs. All right. 19.5% of the funds will go to higher education. You have 3.25% of the funds will go to career and technology education, and then about 8% of the funds will go to early childhood education. All right. Proponents of this make the argument that we know that education funding in Oklahoma is in a critical situation, and this is a means by which to address that. They say that it will ensure a guaranteed source of funds for education, and it prevents the legislature from using these funds for other purposes, and that the salary increases included would actually be permanent salary increases, not like a one-time bonus that goes away the next year. Opponents say that this sales tax will hit lower income households the hardest. Most observers regard sales taxes as regressive taxes, that low income households spend more of their money on items that are hit by the sales tax, and so they will be shouldering the burden of this new funding mechanism. They also argue that it weakens the legislature's ability or responsibility to actually fund education appropriately. It ties its hands somewhat in that area. And they argue that municipal governments will have a harder time using the sales tax or increasing sales tax to provide such services as police, fire, water, sewage, and sanitation services. State Question 780 is one of two that deal with kind of criminal justice reform. All right, 780 would lower or raise the amount of drugs a person could have on their person and it not be considered a felony. All right, it would also declassify certain drugs that just having them is a felony to misdemeanors as well. Okay, this measure would change the classification of these drugs considered felonies, and it would increase the dollar amount that if someone stole something, the value of that, the dollar amount, it would increase that from $500 to $1,000 before it's considered a felony. All right. Again, proponents of this measure argue that it will reduce the prison population and save tax dollars, that treating drug offenders with rehabilitation and health services is more effective than sending them to prison, and prosecutors will still have the discretion to determine whether to charge simple possession or possession with the intent to distribute, which would remain a felony. All right. Opponents argue that reducing the charges of drugs could endanger citizens. They argue that it would disincentivize offenders to go to counseling and attend drug court, make their drug court appearances because there's no leverage over them. They also argue that, yes, you may see a reduction in state prisons, but you might also see an increase in county jail populations, as those are still places where people convicted of misdemeanors will serve out their offenses. All right, 781 is tied to 780, all right? If 780 does not pass, it doesn't matter if the majority of voters vote for 781 or not, okay? If 780 passes, then if voters approve question 781, it will create a funding mechanism to use the savings that are supposed to be identified from not sending these people to prison, all of that, to create rehabilitation programs, okay? It would require the Office of Management and Enterprise Services to use data and to, or at least use an estimate of how much savings recurred from not sending so many people to prison, and then that funding would be distributed to counties based on those counties' population, all right, to use again specifically for rehabilitation services. Advocates say that this will provide a way to finance mental health and drug rehabilitation programs, which again are perceived as not having adequate funding currently. And they argue that treatment for these low-level offenders is much more effective than incarceration. Opponents argue that the revenue stream is not guaranteed. All right? In other words, it depends on identifying an actual savings. Okay, and then that the legislature is still obligated to appropriate these funds. So there are a couple of obstacles, even if this question passes, for it to actually, opponents say, to actually being effectively implemented. All right, state question 790 is another one you may or may not have heard about. All right, this question would repeal a part of the state constitution, all right? So again, one more constitutional amendment, if you will, in these state questions. This would amend a section of the state constitution sometimes referred to as the Blaine Amendment. This amendment states that the state cannot use public funds or property for the direct or indirect benefit of any religion or religious institution, okay? So those who support this argue that the Supreme Court's interpretation of this section of the state constitution creates or makes the state government hostile to religion. All right. They also argue that religious liberty should allow monuments like the Ten Commandments on state capitol grounds. And they argue that this would also allow religious institutions to participate in public programs on an equal basis with non-religious institutions. Opponents argue that this would expose the state to costly, expensive lawsuits over what can and can't be placed on public property or what funds could or couldn't go to religious institutions. It would allow state monies to be used to support religious purposes or religious-based schools or activities. They also argue that the state would be besieged, if you will, inundated with other religious groups who want monuments up on public grounds as well. Yes?
That was a little bit confusing for me still. So on that one, if approved, property for religious purposes.
Right. Now, we would still be restricted by the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, right? This particular provision, and many states have this provision in their constitutions, goes a little bit further than how the Supreme Court has interpreted the Establishment Clause. So it wouldn't be like you could just do anything you wanted. The state could do anything they wanted in this area. But it does make it easier for religious institutions, or as it says, easier for religious schools to access public funds for certain programs and such. Okay. Okay. State Question 792 deals with alcohol, right? And so this is a movement to, as the supporters say, modernize Oklahoma's alcohol laws. Interestingly enough, it would limit the ownership interest of alcohol-related businesses to one area of the industry. So if you owned a distributorship, you could not also own a liquor store, or you could not also own a brewery, all right, under this provision. It limits your ownership interest into one of these areas of the alcohol industry across the board. All right. The legislature would be able to authorize direct shipments of wine to consumers. So if you wanted to order wine online from a winery in the state or even outside of the state, the legislature could make that possible. It would allow grocery and convenience stores to sell High Point beer and wine, and it would allow liquor stores to sell non-alcohol items. Okay. So opponents now, or proponents of this, argue that Oklahoma's laws need to be modernized. Passage would give Oklahoma consumers the same access to wine and beer that consumers have in 45 other states. Okay. And that the state is losing its tax revenues because of the way our liquor laws are currently structured. Opponents argue that additional competition from grocery stores and convenience stores would hurt liquor stores. Okay. That allowing a grocery and convenience store to sell wine and beer could place more power in the hands of a few corporate entities. Okay. And that it could also allow out-of-state wholesalers to create small monopolies in one area of the industry. All right, so something I think is really interesting to think about when you think about these state questions, right? These state questions allow you, as the citizen, to create law. In some cases, to amend the state constitution, right? In most cases, we have a representative system where we elect people who go and do that on our behalf. But these state questions empower you, the individual citizen, to help make this decision, all right? It's one of the only forms of direct democracy that we see on a broad basis at the state and local level. And so when you think about that, that's a pretty cool responsibility to be able to have a part in making law, right? And so I want to encourage you to get out and vote. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have over these state questions. So does anybody have something they would like to ask? Yes?
It's my understanding that it's our right to write in a candidate that isn't listed on the ballot. Where would you do that?
That's an excellent question. In Oklahoma, you do not have that right. We do not have a place for a write-in candidate. Some states do, but Oklahoma does not. You had a question? Yes, sir.
What day is it decided on who becomes the president? Like the official date after the vote?
All right, so approximately 30 days from the presidential election on November 8th, the Electoral College will meet. And when I say that, okay, at each state capital, the electors for that state will meet and cast their official votes for president. All right? Those ballots will be forwarded to Congress and will be opened approximately January 3rd or 4th when the new Congress comes back and sits to open them and announce the results. Okay? Yes, ma'am. That's a good question, and I didn't go into that. Some of the laws have enacting provisions that are out maybe a year or two, right, to give people time to adjust. Some of them will become law once they're passed for the most part, all right? Each state question's a little bit different, okay? And this is different than if the legislature passes a law. Normally, if the state legislature passes a law during its regular session, that law will become effective like November 1st of that year. Okay, so there's a length of time before it takes effect. But with the state questions, there's not, unless they write into the question a delaying mechanism of some sort, it becomes law almost immediately. Once the ballots are certified and the election has been officially certified by the Secretary of State, it becomes law. Good question. Anybody else have a question? Yes?
Okay, so are the votes counted by hand or electronically?
In Oklahoma, we have electronic machines that count the ballots. All right. So if you looked at that ballot, thank you. All right. So I was asked in Oklahoma, do we have electronic ballots or signature ballots, paper ballot, right? So you would fill out the ballot by hand. You notice there's a little square, and they want you to ink in that square by the person you're voting for or the vote for yes or no on the state question. Okay. Then you would take that, and they have a scanner, basically a scanner, that you submit that in, and that scanner records your votes based off how you marked your ballot.
Can it be hacked?
It has not been up to this point. Okay, so
I'm not saying I'm going to hack it.
we've got somebody who's trying to figure out how to mess with the votes already, right? Yeah, no. In fact, again, Oklahoma's voting system has been recognized nationally for both its effectiveness and its security. So I would say the likelihood of it being hacked is very, very low. Someone else? Yes, sir.
On the education sales tax, is there anything in there that keeps that money from supplanting other money earmarked for education?
Yes, there's a provision that says that the state cannot then, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting, I need to repeat. So the question was, this is for our live stream, folks, so maybe you guys didn't hear it over at this end. The question was, is there provision in the education question that prevents the legislature basically from reducing its spending on education because we've got these extra funds coming in from the state question? And the answer to that is yes. There is a provision, and it would limit. This is in fact one of the opponents' arguments. It would tie the legislature's hand in funding of education. In this case, it would tie them by not allowing them to spend less than a certain amount based on what we've spent over the last year or 2 years or whatnot. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I overheard a question in the audience. I'm repeating it so everybody can hear it. Do you know what percentage our sales tax would increase to if approved? And would it place us in, where would it place us in terms of highest and lowest sales tax?
Okay, so the question is, what percentage of increase will the sales tax go up to? So that really depends on where you live, right? Because each municipality, so when you go and pay sales tax, let's say you bought a Mountain Dew and you didn't buy it in the machine, right? So let's say you went to the convenience store, you buy that Mountain Dew, they say it's 60 cents and you pay 64 cents or whatnot on it, right? Or if it's $1, you end up paying $1.08 or $1.07, in some cases $1.06, depending on not only the state sales tax, but the municipal sales tax that is added in as well. All right. So in Oklahoma City, your sales tax would go to about 9%. In Midwest City, I believe it would go to 8%. I think they're a penny per dollar lower than Oklahoma City's. So how much your particular sales tax would go up depends on where your municipality is. It would all go up by 1 cent, but what that would be depends on where you live. Okay. What was the other part of that? Oh, where does that place us? Estimates have said that this would make Oklahoma have the highest state sales tax in the country, okay, if this was passed. So I don't know if that, some people have said, that would be, again, problematic. Some have said not so much. Okay. Anybody else have a question they'd like to throw out here? Anyone? No one? Good. All right. So if you feel comfortable with these, everyone should have gotten a voter's guide, right? Can I borrow that for just a second? All right. One of these. I encourage you to take these. They have information about all of these state questions, more information than I went into in the presentation. So they have more information about those. They also have information about candidates for office, as well as some general voting information as well. Yes, ma'am.
Whenever we go to cast our ballot, are we allowed to bring in any outside source, maybe stating which people we're trying to vote for?
Good question. So the question was, when you go to vote, can you bring in some sort of material with you to help you remember who you plan on voting for? In general, no. All right. Now, if an individual has a particular disability, I believe there's an exception for that type of thing. But they're very strict on that. Now, if you brought in a handwritten note or something, that might be okay. Okay. But I'm just going to say, if you have some strict poll watchers, they may tell you can't have that. Okay. Even so. In general, I would say it's safer not to bring anything in. There is a strict prohibition on campaign-related material. So let's say you got a mail piece from someone, a candidate in the mail, and you wanted to bring that, and maybe you made some notes on it. They would not allow that in the polling place. So there's a strict prohibition on campaign information being at the polling place. Yes, sir.
I was just going to add to what you were saying, and you can repeat this in a second. If because you were asking if people can come, the people can come with you. They do have a provision for disability if you have some form of a hand tremor to where you can't sign the ballot yourself, or if you are legally blind, you would have someone come with you to help you fill out the ballot, or they have a person there at the station to help you fill it out.
Right. So in certain circumstances, you are able to have an individual. Again, usually those are tied to a disability. Although I know as a parent, I brought my minor children to come in and vote with me before, and there was absolutely no problem with that either. They didn't get to vote, by the way, just to making sure you know. They didn't get a ballot, too.
I was going to say, in response to, are you allowed to bring notes? It says on the back page that you can and bring them into the voting booth.
Okay, so that would be like your own personal notes,
Yeah,
right?
you can bring
Yeah.
that. You can
Yeah.
do a simple cheat sheet. They
Right.
don't-
So if you have but I will say you may get some stickler. Poll workers don't always know the rules real well as also, and some of them will be real sticklers. I've had students who were taking selfies either after voting or while they had their ballot before they voted, and they got some harassment. I don't want to say harassment, but they got some poll workers who thought that was inappropriate. So, but you can't always point to say, hey, I can bring in handwritten notes to tell, to help me out.
So it can't be, you said it can't be printed.
I would not bring any printed material just to be on the safe side. I would resort to handwritten notes just to.
If we wanted to just tear this off, would we take it?
I would not. Okay. Yes.
One of the League of Voters said that's why they did this.
Uh-huh.
Was so that you could tear this piece off and take it in with you.
What's that?
That's why.
Is that the one that talks about the questions? Yeah. I would still. I'm going to tell you, having seen what's happened in some of these places, you're going to be safer just handwriting it than you are even bringing that. Okay. Now, not all poll workers are going to be that way, but some could be. I would say you're safer writing it out. Any other questions that I can answer for you? All right. So, do you guys feel like you know a little bit more about these questions? Yeah. Do you feel like this will be helpful when you walk in? And let me tell you, you're going to walk in, and on the ballot, you're going to see language on that state question that will not be as concise and clear as what I presented or what the League of Women Voters has presented, all right? The language on state questions is written not to be clear and concise for voters, but to satisfy attorneys and legal requirements for the question, okay? Requirements that are in state law or in the state constitution. So I really want to encourage you, if you still have questions about these questions, go on and research them more, because reading it on the ballot will not help you make a decision. I can guarantee you that, okay? All right, do you have anything you would like to say?
Professor Davenport, around the
I want to say thank you so much for taking your time. This was much more than I anticipated it would be today, so thank you. I'm very excited to see you guys are engaged in the process. It thrills my heart, makes me happy. Now, how many of you, I'm going to ask for a show of hands, are not registered to vote? Okay, if you are not registered to vote, we do take part in the campus compact here through the Regents of Higher Education, so we do have some forms that we can fill
Some
out.
voter registration forms?
We have voter
Okay.
registration forms, and we have them right over here. You can take them with you and fill them out and get them back to our student affairs office or student engagement office, and we can make sure that those get turned in the appropriate time frame by Friday.
Excellent.
So, thank you so much for your time today. Yes, ma'am.
All right, you're graduating. Your parents are proud, you're relieved, but now what? Where are you going? How about a college where you won't get overwhelmed and still get the full college experience? Great. Let's start at Rose State. Rose State starts you out with a choice from more than 60 degrees and certificate programs. And Rose State offers compelling value in its 2-year degrees. Consider the Rose State graduate feedback in a recent survey. 95% of recent Rose State graduates are employed. 95% would recommend Rose State to a friend. And 97% would get their associate degree if they had to do it all over again. But don't worry. Students at Rose State are so much more than just a number. We'll help you along the way. With smaller class sizes, you can enjoy a hands-on academic lifestyle with a friendly, engaging, and experienced staff. With Oklahoma's first urban community college housing, you can live on campus and enjoy a bustling student life, from sports to an award-winning performing arts center. But at the end of the day, it's all about you and where you want to go. So what are you waiting for? Get started. Rose State College. Going somewhere starts here. All right.